I'm just in the middle of, well, nearly finished now, installing an old oil stove into the house where a wood burner used to be. The reason for me replacing the wood burner is because the wood burner was getting old. I think it was about 10 years old, and it was never actually really big enough to keep the fire in overnight. It was actually a multi-fuel stove, but the only way you could ever really keep the fire in was to really load it up high and shut it down. But even then, you'd still have to get up about 4 o'clock in the morning to try and catch it before it would relight again without having to do it all from scratch. So basically, because we're quite isolated, we've got no mains gas, and bottle gas is very expensive. Electricity is quite expensive. Wood is okay if you've got a big enough appliance to keep it going. This isn't a particularly big room. This is only 11.5 foot by 11.5 foot, something like that. Not quite 12 by 12. So if you have a bigger wood burner, then you'd have to put a lot more fuel on to keep it going overnight. So the next cheapest option for most people in this situation is to have oil, usually oil-fired central heating. That's the most cost-effective way of heating a home. Anyway, the other alternative, we don't really have the option of having oil-fired central heating. It's very expensive. It would require to have a header tank, and the house hasn't got really any space for a header tank. There isn't very good mains pressure. We don't have any mains water on spring. So the logistics of putting oil-fired central heating are quite complicated. So the other option is to have something like either a oil-fired Aga for cooking and perhaps some background heat, or oil-fired Rayburn or something like that. Anyhow, I knew from my vintage catalogues and things that there were quite a few of these, what they call pot burners. This is by a company called Potez, I assume is how you pronounce that, which is actually an Irish, I think it's actually a French company, but they had a factory in Ireland back in the 40s through to, I assume, the sort of 70s. And the reason I wanted to go for this type of stove is because it's what they call a pot vaporizing pot burner. So it doesn't require a wick. It essentially just drips oil into basically a pot, which then vaporizes when it gets to the temperature when you light it, and then you have a flame. I have to try and get this off the big edges. Let's have a look in there. You can see this is on its lowest setting, and then what would happen is as you increase the heat setting on the back, it goes up to the various rings, but the bottom ring being the lowest. What I like about this particular type of pot burner stove by this company is they actually have a heat exchanger here. They did two different types of these stoves. This I think is a very late one, possibly 60s. It does look a bit industrial. I bought this brand new in its box. It's just got a little bit of rusting on the front here, but this has never been used and was brand new in the original box, which is why I went for this. Very rarely you see them come up for second hand for sale, and they're often in a more Art Deco looking cabinet. I say this is quite a late cabinet, but because it was brand new in box, I thought, well, the very rare opportunity to get another one of these in such good condition. So you can either light it through the front here, the porthole, or if you lift this lid, this is just the outer casing. This all lifts off, leaving you with the actual main unit here. Or you can lift it up through the flap here at the top. This is where they did used to have integral tanks, I believe. This doesn't have the integral tank because it has the standard oil control valve that you see on most oil appliances. Let's see if I can turn the light on. Make make it a bit lighter. As I say, I haven't quite finished installing this correctly yet, or finished doing it improperly. I need to retile behind here and everything. But there's your oil control valve there, which you see on most wick type Rayburns and Argas and things. I do believe they don't make this anymore. This is a discontinued thing, but there is a more modern equivalent. The nice thing about this as well is you can fit a electronic thermostat which actuates a pin which basically turns the fire up and down depending on the temperature, which is like an optional extra. They actually go on about a in the actual magazine here, catalogue here, I think it's in one of the, I think it's actually in the back page. It does actually say optional extras, one of them just being a thermostat. There we are, thermostatic comfort control, and it just basically screws on. They now do a electric version which you can still fit to this if I ever find one. This is the delivery docket. As I said, it was all brand new in box. I even got the little pouch with the tools for it. But the idea is we're going to have an extension onto this room, making this room having another room out there. That's going to be about 16 foot by 10 foot. So we needed a good, reliable source of heat that we don't have to worry about. The type of usage this has, it's written on here. So you've got on the low setting, which is what it's on now, you've got 3.75 cc's a minute. So if you work that out on a 1,000 litre oil tank, that is actually quite a cost-effective way of heating. As I say, most of these pot burners, you literally just have the chamber here and the flue goes straight outside. There's no heat exchanger like you've got here. You wouldn't think that you'd get, you wouldn't think that this heat exchanger would make much difference, but in actual fact, this is unbearably hot to touch. You wouldn't be able to touch any of this. Even the heat exchanger is actually too hot for me to touch. It's that hot. However, the flue pipe out the back here, I can actually touch. There's hardly any heat coming out of this at all. So it's actually comfortable for me to put my hand on, which is astonishing when you consider how hot the rest of this is. As I said, it is unbearable to touch this. I'd love to get a one of those temperature sensors to actually, a temperature gun to actually show you how hot this is compared to how unbelievably cool the flue is. So this heat exchanger and the way that this labyrinth, the way that it vents the fumes, it must be incredibly efficient. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go for one of these, and I assume why they're so hard to get hold of. They're literally impossible to find even second hand when you sort of Google this name. They must have been popular in Ireland, and they're probably, I mean, even more, these pot burners now are more popular with people who burn vegetable oil and things, and these vaporizing pot burners. The great thing about them is there's no wick. And all you do here on this system is they have two nozzles, a front nozzle and a back nozzle, and it says you're supposed to change it every day. I just changed it this morning to the front nozzle after it being on the rear nozzle for 24 hours. I haven't got it connected to my big tank at the moment. I've only got a small tank because I literally just wanted to test it because it was brand new in box and it's probably been in that box for about 50 odd years. I wanted to make sure that there was no major leaks or anything before I went and connected it directly to a big oil tank out the back. But this is an incredibly heavy, thick, well-insulated lid. I mean, it has to be because it gets so unbearably hot, the thing beneath, but now you can just feel all the heat coming out. What I might do with this is, because there's this big void here where the integral tank would go on the integral models, what I could actually do is put some small, some large but USB driven computer fans to sort of circulate a bit more heat from around the cabinet, to give it a little bit of an assistance with moving some heat about. We'll have to wait and see. It's quite chilly at the moment here. I think it's about 12 degrees outside here, and of course we're up quite high. We've got quite a high altitude up here, so it's not best. Even if it's warmer down in town, it'll be a good 4 or 5 degrees cooler up here. But yeah, it's a shame they don't make anything like this anymore. And as I said, I couldn't believe how efficient this heat exchanger is, because there's literally the flue is just warm to the touch. Yet here, it's, you know, unbearably hot. You wouldn't be able to press your skin against it. It's just too hot. If anyone else has ever seen these heaters or had experience with them, I'd love to hear, and I'd like to know, you know, how popular they were, or if anyone remembers seeing them. I said I knew of them from my catalogues and things from the 50s that I've got, sort of ideal home catalogues and things, where they go on about these heaters and these fires. But this is the first and only one I've ever seen in the flesh.